Welcome to IRA, episode 105, live stream, in which we're going to talk about the link between queer theory and pedophilia. And so over the course of this episode, we're going to kind of be reacting to a video by a professor named Derrick Jennings, who went viral with his queer theory Jeopardy. It's basically 5 questions in $100 increments in which Professor Jennings takes apart the links between queer theory and pedophilia. He also links anarchy or anarchist theory and ideology to these notions, the support of pedophilia and the normalization of sex between minors and adults. And he presents very specific examples of it, and then he closes with one of the most devastating questions of all. That is queer theorists who have come out against pedophilia. And so what I'm going to do is, without further ado, play that video for you and give you my reaction and commentary on it. If I can get it to load.
There is a long correlation between anarchism and pedophilia and support for pedophilia.
Something relevant, please.
Wait. That's a beautiful line. Thank you so much for asking. How about something relevant? I've been talking about rape culture all day, and pedophilia and the support of pedophilia is not rape culture? Actually, it seems you're acting like this is a spurious connection. So we're going to play Jeopardy. We're going to play queer theory. We're going to play queer theory pedophilia Jeopardy. Okay, answer. Commonly called the godfather of queer theory.
Who is Foucault?
Who is Foucault?
I got it.
Okay, 100 points. Foucault. Another way to ask this is who argued, no, I guess the answer would be, argued for the eradication of age of consent laws as in down to infants.
Who is Foucault?
Thank you.
Okay, next one. The author of the founding document of queer theory.
Who is Gail Rubin?
Who is Gail Rubin? What percentage? No, the answer is 50%. Question is?
The amount in that article that was a defense of pedophilia, specifically, quote, boy lovers, so men who fuck boys.
Oh. And since you're not believing me, quote, this is in the founding document of queer theory. Like communists and homosexuals in the 1950s, boy lovers are so stigmatized that it is difficult to find defenders of their civil liberties, let alone for their erotic orientation. That's in the founding document of queer theory. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm using facts. A thousand apologies. One must never let facts in the way. Oh, and she also compared, by the way, she compared pedophilia to a preference for spicy food.
And so what you would never want to do here is use facts when you're arguing with leftists, because then they get upset. That's when they start engaging in name calling. That's when they start saying that you're homophobic, and he's going to address that later. There's clearly kind of a split audience here. There's the audience that is applauding him as he makes his points, and then there is the audience that is appalled that he would link pedophilia with queer theory and anarchism in a negative way, as opposed to a way that affirms all three. That is anarchism, or anarchist theory, queer theory, and pedophilia. Because this is what's going on in our universities and colleges today. This is what's being normalized. And so what you're talking about is the next generation of thinkers, of writers, of influencers who currently believe that pedophilia should be normalized. You're seeing that change in the vernacular. You're seeing pedophiles being referred to as minor attracted persons as opposed to pedophiles, which is already a step down from child rapist, which is what they are, child rapist. So as we continue with this, I want you to pay attention to how this professor, Professor Derrick Jennings, parries his quite liberal class, or the elements of his class that are quite liberal, who are playing along with this lecture.
The thing is, I have never heard of anyone who has to have years of therapy because they ate hot and sour soup. Okay, so up to 200. Now it is pedophilia and queer theory for 300. That would be author of Macho Sluts. Author of Macho Sluts and Public Sex. Pat Califia.
Derrick Jennings is an eco-fascist.
Wait. What was it somebody said? Stay relevant. Okay, let's talk about Pat Califia.
Why don't you respond?
Because I can't respond.
Fucking transphobe.
Okay, here's something from one of Pat Califia's books. You know, it's really interesting. It's really interesting that when I actually start.
So, of course, you know, no one's ever had to have lifelong therapy because they ate spicy food. He's absolutely 100% right about that. And so that's what we're dealing with here. We're talking about the difference between what a queer theorist thinks, which is they think it's a totally logical analogy to make to analogize child sexual abuse with eating spicy food. Same thing, same difference. And of course, Professor Derrick Jennings isn't having that. He's saying, I've never heard of anybody who had to have lifelong therapy because they had spicy food. And of course, he flips the script on the audience member. He says, what was it somebody said here? Stay relevant. And so what you're looking at here is exactly how these things should be handled when you're debating a leftist or a liberal. You come prepared with the facts, and all you have to do is use their own words against them. That's it. That is all you have to do. And once you do that, they don't have a leg to stand on, because unfortunately with these people, they do things like analogize child sexual abuse to eating spicy food. That's the level of rhetoric and logic that we're encountering. And so if you can't win an argument with a leftist, then what I would say to you is you deserve to lose. Because all you have to do is read their own words back to them and read the words of their heroes and their leading thinkers. In this case, all the queer theorists that he's cited so far, all he's doing is taking their own words out of their own writing, and he's using it to make his point. Because they make their point for you 90% of the time. These people are fringe for a reason. And so let's continue with the video real quickly. I'm going to turn my mic off.
Start talking about the relationship between queer theory and anarchism and pedophilia, that it becomes, they really want to shut me up now. Okay, so here's Pat Califia.
You're a homophobe.
Pat Califia. Oh, wait, just a second. I was accused of homophobia because I'm against pedophilia.
Right.
Who is it who actually makes the connections between that? Okay, here's something by Pat Califia. Pat Califia has written, any child old enough to decide whether or not she or he wants to eat spinach, play with trucks, or wear shoes is old enough to decide whether or not she wants to run around naked in the sun, masturbate, sit in someone's lap, or engage in sexual activity, by which she does not mean play doctor, she means with adults. And she's very clear about that, because she also says that pedophiles should be more and not less invested in children's lives. Okay, so we're at 300. 400 is the most famous queer theorist of today? Answer. No, it is not Judith Butler. It's who is Judith Butler? Okay, Judith Butler is the most famous queer theorist of the day.
We see you, all of you supporters here, who do not care about trans people's lives. Every person here supporting this that you don't.
Okay. Here's a great quote from Judith Butler.
Then it's the fucking truth. Are you supporting them?
Okay, so Judith Butler wrote, so I keep adding this qualification. When incest is a violation, suggesting I think there may be occasions in which it's not. Why would I talk that way? Well, I do think that there are probably forms of incest that are not necessarily traumatic, and which gain their traumatic character by virtue of the consciousness of social stain that they produce. Yeah, that's Judith Butler. That's one of the queer heroes. Okay, now we have for 500 we have the last one in the queer theory and pedophilia. The answer is queer theorist who has spoken out strongly against pedophilia.
Zero. Who is no one.
Who is no one, not a single one. Because the entire thing is based on transgressing. Yeah, I know, dear fucking God.
So there you go. Who's the queer theorist who spoke out against pedophilia? None. That's the kill shot, folks. That's the kill shot when you're dealing with a leftist. Is, in my humble opinion, born out of years of engaging with leftists and the extreme right, is the measure of both. This is how you know you're dealing with an extremist, whether they're on the right or the left. They accept sex with children as the norm. And it doesn't matter, like, a lot of people will probably disagree with me because I say it's the extreme right. But here's the thing about these so-called extreme right groups. These Christian identity groups, these groups that fall on the right because, they are ethnocentric, and Eurocentric and whatnot. That is, they believe that being white makes them superior to other races, just the same way that Zionists believe that being Jewish makes them godlike or gods compared to other races or other ethnicities. At the end of the day, that sort of diseased thinking is almost always accompanied by a sexual proclivity for children. That's the reality of it. And when you talk about these types of extremists on the right or the left, ultimately they are going to abuse children. And they're going to seek to normalize the abuse of children. They're going to seek to normalize things like incest. There's no two ways about it. And so one of the theories that I have about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and why they become suddenly so much more permissive about the LGBTQIA issue and why you have active Latter-day Saints who are openly gay, married to someone of the same sex, is because the church is going to use that issue to piggyback its own advocacy of the restoration of plural marriage and polygamy. Give it 5-10 years. You're going to see same-sex healings in Latter-day Saint temples. I guarantee it. It's going to happen. And it's not because the church is suddenly so much more tolerant or so much more understanding or so much more diverse. It's because it is a means to the end of restoring plural marriage. If you have same-sex marriage legalized and it's a civil right, then plural marriage polygamy can be restored, because after all, it's between consenting adults, just like same-sex marriage is between consenting adults. Now, for those of us who are traditionalists when it comes to marriage, one of the things that we view marriage as is comprised of three parties, and one is the husband, a biological male. The other is the wife, a biological female. And the third party is God. It's a covenant that you don't make to each other. It's a covenant that you make to God. Like the husband and the wife make a covenant to God that they're going to fulfill the biblical model of marriage, the traditional model of marriage, where the husband models himself after Christ, who gave himself for the church, and he sacrifices himself for his wife and his children. And the wife, being the bride, just like the church is the bride of Christ, submits herself to her husband, who is serving her in his leadership and in his headship. And the covenant that they make isn't to each other. The covenant they make is to God. Now, contrast that with secular marriage, which has overwhelmingly become the ecclesiastical version of marriage. Marriage in today's society is little more than a piece of paper. And the third party isn't God. It's a man and a woman, or a man and a man, a woman and a woman, and it's the state. That's what we're dealing with here. That's the level of what the state hopes to usurp here. It hopes to usurp God. And it hopes to take the place of God. And you saw that at every turn over the past 5 years. You have seen it. You've seen strip clubs and liquor stores classified as essential businesses during COVID, and they were allowed to stay open. And then you saw churches not classified as essential and ordered to close. They're a public health threat. You saw these protests about social justice and race and police brutality where people are out in the open. They're not social distancing. They're not wearing masks. They're allowed to do what they're doing. But even though that right is enshrined in the Constitution, absolutely correct, they should have been allowed to protest in the streets. We have freedom of religion in the First Amendment too. Not just freedom of assembly and freedom of speech, but freedom of religion. And that freedom wasn't honored. And here's the thing. It wasn't honored because the real enemy of the state has always been God. That's the reality of it. I mean, God does not set himself into opposition with the state or civic authority. In fact, in Romans it says, the ministers of justice are established by God to be a terror to evil works, not to good. And what I posit to you is that they have become a terror to good works. Because if you stand up and you say that pedophilia is wrong, that child sexual abuse is wrong, you're called a bigot. You're called narrow-minded. You're called intolerant. And in the meantime, these so-called queer theorists, as we saw in this video, they are able to normalize what would have been seen as depravity or degeneracy just 10 years ago. Like that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with it in Obergeville versus Hodges, which is the Supreme Court case that basically threw open the doors for gay marriage. It legalized it in all 50 states. It said it was a constitutional right, which is amazing. Because for women in this country to have the right to vote, they had to have the passage and ratification of the 19th Amendment. It wasn't part of substantive due process or equal protection under the law, under the 14th Amendment. You had to have a separate constitutional amendment. But under the idea of substantive due process under the 14th Amendment, what you have is the doors thrown open for things like abortion or for same-sex marriage, because substantive due process, whatever the hell that means. But in the meantime, For a woman to be able to vote in this country, we had to have an actual constitutional amendment to give her that right. Now, there were certain states where women could vote, but for it to be a right, it had to be, the Constitution had to be amended. The intellectual bankruptcy of the left's position is obvious here. The intellectual bankruptcy of applying the 14th Amendment as a catch-all, or as the left would put it, a cure-all for every societal injustice, be it abortion, which they call pro-choice, or, same-sex marriage, which they call equal protection, because after all, if the state's going to legitimate or license opposite-sex couples for marriage, it has to confer the same treatment onto same-sex couples. And by extension, with the Latter-day Saints, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the reason they become so friendly with the LGBTQIA community, the reason they become so tolerant, and you now have transgenders being able to use the bathroom that, comports to their gender, the gender that they feel they are, rather than the one that they were, supposedly assigned at birth, is because they're using that as an incremental advance towards the restoration of plural marriage, the restoration of polygamy. And for that to happen, polygamy has to become legal. And if two men can, have the right to a marriage, and two women can have the right to a marriage the same as any opposite-sex couple, then guess what? A man and two women, or a woman and three men, can have the same. And the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is willing to cheapen marriage by accommodating gay Latter-day Saints like Charlie Bird, who's married to a man and who holds a church, who holds a calling in his ward. John DeLynn got into more trouble for pointing that out than Charlie Bird's bishop and stake president got into with Salt Lake for actually allowing it. It's the same thing with the new guidance that has been issued in terms of transgender Latter-day Saints, which is an oxymoron, just as like transgender Christian is an oxymoron. There's no such thing. Just as they've issued the guidance that trans members can use the bathroom that corresponds to their chosen gender or their authentic self, whatever you want to call it. The Church of Jesus Christ Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is moving in that direction precisely because they want the same effective coverage for plural marriage, and also because they're demonic. There's just no two ways about it. And the fact that the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 have not cracked down on this is one of the many reasons I left the church. I firmly believe, if the church would enforce its rules, it would have converts coming out of its ears, because people know the difference between the genuine article and the fake article. And all I ever contended for as a Latter-day Saint was for the church to enforce its own rules. Even after I left, I've said that to people who remain in the church, it's, if you enforced your own rules, you wouldn't have this issue. You wouldn't have rampant sexual abuse in the church. And here's the thing about queer theory as it relates to that issue. Anyone who knows gay men knows that they have far different normative standards when it comes to sexual acts between adult males and pubescent, adolescent boys. That is, they're under 18, but they're adolescents. The number of gay friends that I've had over the course of my life who were sexually abused, it's unanimous among the men. And the number of them who had kind of a laissez-faire attitude towards the idea of a teenager being sexually involved with a male adult. is staggering. There was no stigma attached to it. Hebophilia and ephebophilia in that community is widely tolerated and widely normalized. There's just no two ways about it. So when we're talking about it, we're talking about queer theory. This is what the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a lot of other mainline churches, to be fair, are allowing into their ranks. When you allow someone who is engaged in open sin to sit and partake in communion and to have full membership and full privileges in your church, you are effectively saying that their sin isn't a sin, that it shouldn't separate them from God, and that it doesn't separate them from God as far as your membership is concerned, as far as participation in your most sacred ordinances is concerned. It doesn't separate them from God at all. And that's what the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is saying. That's what the Catholic Church is saying. That's what the Lutherans are saying in multiple synods. It's what the United Methodist Church has been saying. Like, at least half of that church has been saying this for 20 years. And it's led to schism. I mean, you have the Episcopalians, they have split off now. You have the Anglicans who are outright opposed to this. They're no longer they're no longer in fellowship with the Episcopalian Church in America. Because of it, they split off. Because there are those of us who believe that sin alienates you from God, and that you can't be a member of Christ Church in good standing while you have open, unresolved, and unrepentant for sin in your life. And what we now have in the churches is openly gay people who are married to someone of the same sex, who have church callings, who have full membership and privileges in the church. They vote on church matters. They participate in church leadership and callings. And this is what queer theory is. It's not just that you're normalizing their sin. It's that you are exposing them to your children. And you're normalizing this for your children. And one of the things that you have to understand about queer theorists and queer people in general is that the majority of them have no problem with sexualizing children. They may not come out and say it. I mean, there are some who come out in opposition to it. We've all heard of Gays Against Groomers. It's a catchy title. But it's kind of like saying not all Muslims when it comes to terrorists. It's bullshit. Like, at the end of the day, there are a lot of gay men and even gay women who have normalized the idea of having sex with a teenager, at the very least, as long as they're an adolescent. So they're hebophiles and ephebophiles. That is, they're attracted to pubescent children, because legally they are children. And so queer theory, as pointed out by this Professor Derrick Jennings in the video that I just played, is completely on board with this. It's completely okay with the idea of an adult engaging in a sexual relationship with someone who is legally a child. And the only reason you would be okay with that is if you are yourself a hebephile or an ephebophile. And the only way you're going to be okay with someone having sex with a prepubescent child, it isn't because you're a queer theorist. It isn't because you're queer. It's because you're a pedophile. It's because you're a rapist. Because that child does not have the cognitive capacity or wherewithal to consent to sex because they don't understand the significance of sex. And so what you have in that video, you have the Professor Jennings quoting from queer theorists who say, like, having sex with a child inflicts about as much harm on the child as eating spicy food. To which Professor Jennings says, I don't know anybody who had to have lifelong therapy because they ate spicy food. You have another queer theorist that he quotes saying that if a child is capable of, choosing what to eat or what to wear, They're capable of choosing whose lap to sit in or to engage in sexual acts. That's what queer theory teaches, unanimously. And queer theory is, on some level, it is a theory that is rooted in the homosexual experience. It's a theory that is rooted in same-sex activity and same-sex orientation, if you want to call it that. Like, my personal belief is that you got about as much biological evidence for straight orientation or heterosexual orientation as you do for homosexual orientation or bisexual orientation. It is not at all. We all choose who we sleep with. We're all capable of saying, oh, I don't want to sleep with that person. Like, our sexual attraction to someone based on their sex or their gender is not so overwhelming that we can't exercise any kind of selectivity or agency. We do that all the time. And what the Bible says about homosexuality in Leviticus is it explicitly links homosexuality and homosexual behavior, bestiality, incest. All of that is linked to the inhabitants of the previous land and the gods that they worship. That it's causally linked. You can go read Leviticus 18, 19, and 20. You can read Romans chapter 1, where Paul is talking to Christians, and he's talking about the Roman worshippers of Magna Mater, otherwise known as Cybele. And Magna Mater is a female deity whose male adherents or whose male worshippers would castrate themselves and assume like the feminine role in intercourse. They were bottoms in the parlance of our times. And the female priestesses would violate them sexually with objects. This is not a controversial thing to say. It's the way that worship was carried out. It's the way that those devotees honored Magna Mater. And Paul said that because they had rejected God and they had rejected what was obvious in nature, which is God's design. That nature itself is proof of a creator. That they had worshipped the creation rather than the creator, that God gave them over to their basest desires. And as a result, they became like men burned in their lust for men. They exchanged the natural use of a woman, and women did the same. And as a result, their homosexual conduct was a result of their depraved indifference to God and their rejection of God. So when we talk about queer theorists in our universities and college, and we talk about their impact on our culture, we are talking about the same thing. We're talking about people who reject God. We're talking about people who reject the obvious design of humanity, that a man is designed for a woman sexually and emotionally, and vice versa. A woman is designed for a man. If the entire population was homosexual, we would all be extinct. That's just a matter of fact. If you look at the anatomy and physiology of a woman, she is designed to get pregnant. There are innate differences in sex that carry over to gender. The hormones do result in behavioral differences between men and women. They result in emotional and physiological and psychological differences between men and women that are innate. It's just that simple. We are designed differently. That doesn't make one more or less than the other, because we're designed to be complementary. And the reality of it is, those who reject the clear design of God, who say that gender can be divorced from biological sex, are spewing apostasy. They're spewing a lie from the pit of hell, and they're queer theorists, as outlined in this video. And ultimately, if you follow the yellow brick road where it goes, what you're going to see time and time again is that it leads to the normalization of behavior such as incest, pedophilia, and bestiality. Because these people don't have any normative limits on their sexual desire, and they believe that imposing any such limits, imposing any such norms on human sexuality is inherently oppressive and tyrannical. And they believe that you as a parent telling them that they can't sexually access your children, that they can't indoctrinate your children when it comes to gender theory or queer theory or whatever ideology they're trying to promote, that you're being oppressive to them, you're being oppressive to your child, and you're not letting your child be sexually liberated. That's the world that we're living in, and they are bold about it. They're out there in public saying as much. And you see it in the news. You see what happened at Utah Valley University to Charlie Kirk. We've all heard Phil Lyman on Steve Bannon's The War Room talking about how there was a group of kids present in the aftermath of that shooting who were not frightened, not worried about it being a mass shooting event. They were the LGBTQ kids, he called it. And they had foreknowledge of it. We know that at least half a dozen people had foreknowledge of Charlie Kirk's assassination or plans to kill Charlie Kirk because they were posting about it online as early as August 6th. That is a month and 4 days before it happened. So the idea that these people are normal, the idea that these people are anything that we should accommodate ought to go out the window, not just based on what happened to Charlie Kirk, but what happened in Nashville, what's happened in Minneapolis, what's happened with this transgender cult called the Zizians. What we're seeing time and time again is that these people are truly deranged and violent. And it doesn't have to be homophobia to sit there and say that. It is what it is. Like, if you want to call me homophobic, am I afraid of being shot? Am I afraid that my daughter, when she goes to school, is going to be killed by one of these maniacs? Sure. Like, there's a lot of them, and they're increasing by the day because they reproduce through ideological conversion. That is, they reach these kids in the schools, and they expose them to the ideology. They expose them to things like queer theory, and they tell them that their gender is assigned to them at birth rather than innately linked to their biological sex, and that they may not be a boy or a girl. They may actually be in the wrong body. And they're telling 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds this. And if you don't see it as, inherently evil to do that, to confuse a child at that level, you don't see it as a form of abuse, you and I don't really have any common value system from which to debate. Like, at the end of the day, values begin in the home, not in the classroom. One of the reasons we rank in the 30s in education, even though we have the most expensive healthcare system in the educational system in the industrialized world, is because our teachers aren't teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. They're teaching our children that Black Lives Matter and diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're teaching them slogans, trans lives are real lives, and sex work is real work, and all this other nonsense. Like, at the end of the day, they are indoctrinating our children, not educating them. And the present reality that we live in is a reflection of that we have an indoctrination system rather than an educational system. Because these kids can't read, they can't write, they can't reason, they can't compute. Like, there's a girl who graduated with honors from high school, was admitted to the University of Connecticut. She can't read. Like, it was in the news. She is illiterate. And she graduated with honors. But you know what I bet she knows by heart? Every slogan associated with queer theory, social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I bet she understands those values. She can spew that propaganda and that indoctrination chapter and verse without any issue whatsoever. But she just can't read. She can't write worth a shit. That's what our schools have been transformed into. Down in Payson, Utah, of all places, and Utah is supposedly rock-ribbed conservative, you have these furries, these children who want to dress up like animals and who believe that they are animals, hissing and scratching and clawing their classmates who were so aggrieved about it that they walked out of the classroom and decided to have a protest. Made the national news. Now think about that. If it were in any other context besides furries, would children assaulting their classmates be tolerated? If it were done in the name or for the cause of white ethnic identity, would it be tolerated? No, but because it's furries and they fall under the auspices of queer theory, queer identity, it is tolerated. It is promoted even. And it's normalized. And what I'm saying to you is, like here at Investigations of Ritual Abuse, we focused on the Hamlin case for the better part of 3 years, since August of 2022. I started publishing, next month will mark the 3-year anniversary of IRA as a Substack. And what I would say to you is, if you read the Hamlin victim statements, you have all of the elements of queer behavior there. You have men who dress up like women, men having sex with men. You have pedophilia. You have Marianne Hamlin being brought home from the hospital in days after her birth, being confirmed into the Church of Satan by the men of the group who digitally penetrate her, orally sodomize her, and then ejaculate over her infant body. And I'm sorry if that's graphic, but that's what's in the victim statements. That's what these people do. And when you drive in the homes down Harvard and Yale Avenue, where Gordon Bowen lived, what do you see in the windows? You see rainbow flags. When you drive down to Spring City and you see the people who appear in those victim statements, what do you see? You see rainbow flags. You see the Black Power fist on flags and banners and whatnot. You see in this house, we believe Black Lives Matter and all the signage out front of the mayor's home. You see all of this. You see queer theory in application, in an execution. And you see all of it being normalized. And it's a stone's throw away from saying that consenting adults who are sexually attracted to someone of the same sex should be tolerated within your church, even though it's classified as a sin in the Bible. It's a stone's throw away from that to having sex with kids. Like, that's the reality of it. Yeah, I've presented academic studies on IRA, which show that over 70% of homosexual adults surveyed in these studies disclose childhood sexual abuse, and even more disclose physical and emotional abuse in their childhoods. Like, I want to be very clear to you that this type of sexual behavior is the product of childhood abuse. It is the product of deviant sexual norms being modeled and normalized for children by adults. And when you see a child growing up to identify as queer in their teenage years, you need to look at the parents. You need to look at the adults in that child's life. That's the reality. Because, in all likelihood, something is going on there that should not be going on. And if it isn't going on with the parents, then the next place that you would look is the school. Like, that's the world in which we live. And so when we watch this video of Derrick Jennings talking about the link between anarchism, queer theory, and pedophilia, and the specific quotes that he presents in this video that I played earlier in this broadcast, the link is explicit. They're not hiding it. They have never hidden this. Because they didn't feel the need to. And the good news for you is all you have to do when you're debating them is read their own words. All you have to do is read their own words back to them. All you have to do is quote them in their exact words. And you win the argument every single time, because what they're advocating for is abominable. It's inexcusable. So, in a closing note, what I would say to you is strap in. The war is ongoing, and the war is ideological, but it's also spiritual. And you have to accept it and recognize the fact that these people have gained a foothold in virtually every major Christian denomination. They have overrun our educational centers. Even the so-called Christian universities and schools are infested with this. They're infested with queer theory. They're infested with diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're infested with critical theory. They're infested with all of it. And all of it is satanic, because all of it seeks to normalize sexual degeneracy as a form of individual liberation. That's what you're faced with here. And it's everywhere. It's not just in one little corner of the world. If it's happening in Payson, Utah, with these kids who are furries physically assaulting their classmates, who are so tired of it they just felt the need to stage a walkout, I'm sorry, it's happening in the schools wherever. And you as a parent, as a grandparent, as an aunt, as an uncle, need to be mindful of that, and you need to get involved in the civic process. You need to understand it is going to be a very long, hard road to take our civic institutions back and to kick these people back to the fringes where they belong. And you need to understand something. They aren't just after your child's mind. They're after your child's body. They want to use your child as an instrument of their sexual gratification. That's why I play this video tonight, is to make it abundantly clear to you that the link between not just queer theory, but queer identity in pedophilia is explicit, in the words of queer theorists, in the words of queer advocates. There's no two ways about it. So they're not just after your child's mind. They're not just after your child ideologically. What their ultimate goal is to turn your child into an instrument of their own sexual gratification. And to say that in some way, by doing so, they are liberating your child. And they don't want you as a parent to be able to do a damn thing about it. That's why they're after the lowering of the age of consent, if not the outright abolition of the age of consent. It's why they have redefined marriage secularly, to where now a man can be married to a man, a woman can be married to a woman. In 10 years, plural marriage will be the norm. Polygamy. And, of course, there will be an institutional impetus for that, an institutional catalyst for that, because there are certain denominations, like the church I used to belong to, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which clearly hopes that plural marriage will be legalized again, that polygamy will become the norm. And what I would say to you is it's never gone away. If you read the Hamlin victim statements, polygamy has always been present in these fringe groups that operated in plain sight within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They get sealed in secret home ordinances to each other's daughters, each other's teenage daughters. And because polygamy has never been about relationships between consenting adults. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if you look at what those missionaries were doing in Europe, today it would be called sex trafficking. They were luring girls from poor families, disadvantaged backgrounds, to immigrate to the United States, where they became the house servants of older men and eventually became the wives of those older men. And you can try to dress it up any way that you want. You can call it the new and everlasting covenant. You can call it, plural marriage or polygamy, but these were 14, 15, 16-year-old girls who were in dire straits, and they separated them from their families brought them to a new country, a new culture, a new religion, in an area that was isolated, and then those girls, because they felt like they had no other choice, were married off to these elderly men who were hebephiles and ephebophiles at the very least. And it is a matter of time, I believe, before the lid is blown off on this, and you start seeing allegations come out against Quorum of the 12 members, First Presidency members, like outright abuse allegations. I am aware of dozens of allegations against members of the Quorum of the 12. Each individual member excepting two. Dieter Uchtdorf had one allegation that I'm aware of. Patrick Kieran doesn't have any. But his predecessor, M. Russell Ballard, had a lot of allegations of abuse against him. And the three members of the First Presidency have multiple allegations of abuse against them. And I firmly believe that in the coming weeks, you're going to see some of those allegations come to light. You've already seen it with Justin Riggs' appearance on We Are the People, Utah, in which he talks about Dick and Brenda Miles. And Brenda Miles' father is Russell M. Nelson, who used his position at that time as a newly minted quorum member to quash both the ecclesiastical investigation of the allegations and also the civil investigation, that is, the police investigation into those allegations, because the church in Utah is the only institution in town that matters. And if they don't want it to happen, it's not going to happen. Whether it's the police or politics, that's the reality of it. And some of the content that I'll be generating here in the future will substantiate that claim in terms of the church's involvement in civic matters, in legislation, and reform. I'm working on some major stories about that, and the truth will come out. The truth that has come out is bad enough already, but there's a reason men like Joe Benyon and David Levitt and David Hamlin can operate within the church the way that they have. There's a reason all those names in the Boy Scout of America files can operate in plain sight. And it's because a lot of the leadership participates in this type of abuse. And they all cover for each other. Gadiant and robbers are real. There are just no two ways about it. And there is a sea change coming. And you're going to have to recognize the truth. You're going to have to stand and be counted on this. And you're either going to stand with these people who try to normalize sin, these queer theorists who say that pedophilia should be normalized, that it really isn't that harmful. Or you're going to stand on what biblical truth asserts about these kinds of behaviors. Adultery, same-sex interaction, intercourse, and attraction, bestiality, incest. You're either going to stand on the biblical principle of it, and you're going to recognize that it's tied to the worship of false gods and the embrace of false gods, or you're going to try to contextualize it, normalize it. Depending on where you fall, you're either my ally or my enemy. I am not going to stop talking about this. I'm not going to stop hammering it. If there's one thing I've been delinquent in is not using social media as effectively as I could have to promote content or to drive this messaging, but I'm not shutting up. I recently purchased a lot of equipment to do podcasting for myself and my wife, and so these live streams are going to be a regular thing. And this type of material is going to be a regular thing. And I will talk about it until the day that I die. I will talk about ritual abuse until the day I die. I will talk about this kind of depravity and indoctrination and the normalization of degenerate conduct until I die. And I will stand in opposition to it. I'll ridicule it. I'll expose it. I'll do anything and everything in my power to be an irritant to the people who want to practice it and who want to pretend that it doesn't really exist. And even if it does exist, it's not that big of a deal. This is Goel from Investigations in Ritual Abuse, signing off for the night. I will talk to you probably tomorrow night, because this material never stops replenishing itself. Have a good night, and God bless.